Let's dive into one of the most unbelievable confidence tricks in all of history. Seriously, this is a scheme so big, so elaborate, it didn't just sell a fake product, it sold an entire, completely made-up country. This is the story of a nation that promised a paradise, but delivered an absolute nightmare.
But first, let me ask you something. What if you invested your entire life savings? You packed up your whole family and you sailed halfway across the world to a new nation, only to get there and find out it never existed in the first place. I know, it sounds like a wild plot from a novel, but for hundreds of people in the 1820s, this was their tragic reality.
So let me introduce you to the Principality of Poitiers. Because back in the early 1820s, if you were in London, this place was all anyone was talking about. I mean, just picture the sales pitch. A land of incredible opportunity. The soil was so fertile you could get 3 harvests a year. There was gold, not hidden in mines, but just sitting there, literally glittering in the riverbeds for anyone to take. And this wasn't some chaotic frontier. Oh no, it had a stable, democratic government, a modern army, its own banking system. The capital, St. Joseph, was described as this beautiful, bustling city. It was, simply put, the perfect place to start a new life.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just some vague concept. Poitiers was presented as a totally legitimate, fully formed nation. It even had its own currency, the Poitiers dollar. You could walk into an office in London and eagerly exchange your hard-earned British pounds for these brand new banknotes, thinking you were making the investment of a lifetime.
And that dream was just intoxicating. People were completely swept up in it. We're talking about roughly 250 people, skilled artisans, doctors, entire families with young children who sold their homes, their businesses, literally everything they had. They bought their tickets, boarded the ships, and were ready to become the first proud citizens of Poitiers.
But there was just one tiny, catastrophic problem. Poitiers didn't exist. The beautiful capital, the modern banks, the farms with their endless harvests, the gold in the rivers, none of it. It was all a fantastically detailed and ultimately devastating lie.
So you can imagine the question then, what on earth happened when these hopeful settlers finally arrived? Well, this is the part of the story where the dream completely shatters into a horrifying reality.
So, in late 1822, the first ship arrives on the Mosquito Coast, which is in modern-day Honduras. They were expecting to see the docks of St. Joseph, to be greeted by government officials, but instead, they were met with nothing. Absolutely nothing but a dense, swampy, totally uninhabited jungle. No buildings, no roads, not a single person. Just wilderness.
There's an account from the time that just captures the sheer shock of it all. It said, there was no one to receive them, just an empty, deserted place. Can you even imagine that? After months at sea, filled with all that hope, to be met with that kind of desolate silence? And to make matters worse, the ships that brought them there, they just turned around and sailed away, leaving them completely stranded.
And the result was, predictably, a human catastrophe. They were stuck there with no shelter, their food supplies were running out, and very quickly people started dying from starvation and tropical diseases like yellow fever. Of the roughly 250 people who sailed for this imaginary country, only about 50 survived long enough to be rescued by a passing ship. That means 200 men, women, and children died in that jungle, all for a dream that was nothing but smoke.
So, this brings up the obvious question. Who does this? Who could possibly invent an entire country from thin air? Who could orchestrate a lie so big and so cruel that it cost hundreds of people their lives? Well, it's time to meet the mastermind, a man named Gregor MacGregor. MacGregor was this Scottish adventurer who had a real knack for, let's call it, self-promotion. And if you look back at his life, you see this clear pattern emerge. Poitiers wasn't his first scam, it was just his masterpiece. He was constantly using bribes, marrying into powerful families for connections, and just straight up lying about his military ranks to get ahead. So when he managed to get a huge piece of worthless jungle from a local chief for basically a few bottles of rum, he didn't see a swamp. He saw the raw material for his greatest deception yet.
Okay, so having a piece of jungle is one thing, but how in the world do you convince hundreds of smart people, not to mention the Bank of England, that it's actually a thriving, developed nation? The answer lies in MacGregor's methods, which were, you have to admit, disturbingly brilliant.
He basically launched a full-blown marketing campaign. First, he created the story. He published this incredibly detailed 350-page guidebook to Poitiers, filled with maps and illustrations, and he gave these glowing interviews to all the major newspapers. Then he built an illusion of legitimacy. He opened up official-looking Poyasian offices in London to sell land deeds. To really sell the dream, he even paid singers to walk the streets of London performing songs about the beauty and riches of Poyais. And only then, once the public was totally hooked, did he cash in. He sold fraudulent government bonds, worth about £200,000, to some of the sharpest investors in the world.
All told, McGregor raised an amount that would be equivalent to about $2 million back then. In today's money, that's well into the billions. It's staggering. He didn't just invent a country, he figured out how to monetize a complete fantasy on a massive, massive scale.
So, you'd think, when this whole horrific scam finally came to light, when the stories of the dead and dying made it back to London, McGregor must have faced justice, right? Wrong. And honestly, the answer to that question might be the most infuriating part of this whole story.
As soon as the news broke in 1823, McGregor didn't stick around to answer questions. He fled to France. And what do you think he did there? He tried to pull the exact same scam on a whole new set of French investors. I mean, the audacity is just off the charts. He actually had some success before the French authorities finally caught on and tossed him in jail for a little while. But in the end, McGregor was never prosecuted in Great Britain for the Poyais disaster. The contrast between his fate and his victims is just sickening. They lost everything: their savings, their families, their lives. They got no justice, no recourse. But McGregor, the man who caused all of it, he kept his fortune. He lived out the rest of his days in comfort and luxury and was even given a full military burial in 1845. His crimes were basically rewarded, while his victims were almost completely forgotten by history.
The story of Poyais is, well, it's a chilling lesson in the power of a really good story. It really makes you stop and ask a pretty deep question. What is it about a narrative, a promise of something better, a dream of paradise, that can be so compelling, so incredibly powerful, that people are willing to bet everything they have, even their own lives on it, being true? It's definitely something worth thinking about.